Morning. I am sitting here with my cup of coffee, probably my third one, I think, of the day. Usually I don't do these videos in the morning, but I thought, why not? Try something different. This is my third Unknown Pleasures, where I pick an album and then that I'm not familiar with and listen to it, and then a week later, 2 weeks later, I come back and I talk about it. And the last time when I picked one, I picked the National's new album. You might think it's the one behind me, which is First Two Pages of Frankenstein, which I haven't even talked about on this channel yet because it feels new still. I feel like I was just getting to know it, and what do you know? They go and drop another record on us called Laugh Track, which is basically the same cover work you're seeing behind me, same kid with a mannequin head that says my name is Paul. I would love it if anybody knows what the deal is with the Paul character. I've done a little bit of research and I can't quite figure that out. But it's basically the same cover except he's like standing in front of, I don't know, like a Zoom background or something, a bunch of bookshelves and a couple couches. But so it's like it was a total surprise that there'd be another record that quickly. I remember when this record came out. This is their first record in a few years too. First two pages of Frankenstein. That there's excess material, and then a new record might be not too long in the waiting. But apparently, they put out this record. I think this was back in like May, maybe. It was not that long ago, and they went on tour and they kept writing songs. And this album was difficult to make. Matt Berninger had a writer's block and depression, and they thought that the band might be over, coming out of COVID and all that. But then they found their footing, and he got inspired, and he wrote First Two Pages of Frankenstein. They put out the record, and then while they're on tour, they kept writing new songs to add to the ones that were left over from the session. And what do you know, just a couple weeks ago they put out a brand new record called Laugh Track. Laugh Track is available right now just digitally. It's not on LP. I think it comes out, I can't remember, I think it's later this year, like December maybe. I think it's still in, at least in 2023, but it feels like it's still a ways off. But yeah, I've liked the National for quite a while. I got into them with Alligator, and I really got into them with Boxer. I always loved Alligator. I always loved the song Karen. I love the way he would sing about going out and dressing up. It seemed like he always had such a fashion sense, which I always found kind of interesting. But I got really into him with Boxer, Fake Empire, Mistaken for Strangers. That whole record, just really sounded wonderful to me, and I was pretty obsessed with it around the time that I got to see them live. So interesting story about the National. I actually met them back around the time of Boxer. They were playing at the 400 Bar in Minneapolis, and my friend Greg and I got there kind of early. We're sitting outside this brewery. We're having a couple beers, maybe some food. And I remember at one point I had my back to most of the other people that are sitting outside. My friend Greg was like, "Hey, I think that's a band behind you." And I kind of tried to take a look without looking like I was looking, and I couldn't really tell. And then the waitress came and he was like, "Hey, can you find out if that's the National, and if so, tell him we'd like to buy them around." And we kind of forgot about it. I think it was like 5 or 10 minutes later, we're like engaged in conversation. Then the waitress comes back and she said, "Yeah, that is the National. They would love to take you up on that round, but only if you'll join them." And we're both like, "Wow, that's cool. We're not too hot looking, young females, Okay, awesome." So we packed up our stuff, grabbed our beers and while we were eating, and joined them at their table. And they were the nicest guys. So just normal. And they seemed as interested in talking about us and what we were doing career wise as we were about talking about their band. It probably helped that both of us came from kind of a similar background. The National were graphic designers, a lot of them. Some of them were still working kind of freelance jobs at that time. And I came up. I'm a copywriter, creative director in advertising. So we had something to talk about. And my friend Greg is a fine artist, painter. So there's a lot of overlap, but it was just such a cool conversation. Anyway, several rounds. They were late to soundtrack. They started to stress out about it. They would leave one at a time. Matt and the drummer were the last to leave, and when we finally, my friend Greg and I got to the 400 bar, it was packed. We stood in front of someone and they're kind of giving us some crap, and we're like, hey, we were just hanging out with the band. And they're like, yeah, right. And I'm like, if you were hanging out with the band, we'll buy you a round of drinks if you can prove it. Didn't really think anything of it. They weren't like, they were nice people. They weren't too upset that we were kind of squeezing our way in. The national start, Matt falls into the drum set, gets up. I think they played maybe one song. And he's like, if we're a little sloppy tonight, you can blame Todd and Gregory. And the guy's like, well, what do you want to drink? A super cool experience. After the show, saw them again. Yeah, just really, really good guys, and made me appreciate them even more. And I followed them ever since. And some albums I've liked more than others. I will stick up for I'm Easy to Find. I absolutely love that record. I know it's kind of a polarizing one. I love the female vocals on it. I love the Mike Mills film that went along with it. But anyway, these two albums are the first since then. I'm not always a singles guy. I listen to singles sometimes, and I I almost have taught myself just to wait. I'm almost always disappointed in singles by bands that I'm really into. It takes me a while to get into them. I like to hear them in context of the album. And it was definitely that way with the National. The first single off this one was, I believe it was New Order T-shirt, or no, it was Tropical Morning News. And it wasn't hooky. It didn't really stick with me. I also didn't play it to death. I waited till the album came out. I also had heard New Order T-shirt. Again, it didn't do much for me. My expectations are pretty low for it. But I must say, once I dropped the needle on it and heard Once Upon a Poolside, the first song, and Eucalyptus, and even something like Send For Me on the second side, I really warmed up to this record. I was a little disappointed initially with the singles because I think one of the most interesting things about the band is the drummer and his sound. I can tell a National song by the drumming before the vocals come in, which you can't usually say that for a lot of artists. That a instrumental thing will be so key and so interesting, more than the vocal, where you can kind of base their identity around it. But they used a lot of drum machines and different sounds on it. I do like the record. I think it sustains a mood. Yeah, it talks about his depression. It's kind of a downer. It's kind of like dad rock, whatever that means. He gets the same kind of flack that Jeff Tweedy does. I do find it interesting that both of them seem to sing a lot about like worrying about their spouse leaving them, or wondering what it would be like if they didn't have them, which is really sweet. But it's also, especially I think in Tweedy's case, it starts to get a little much sometimes. But anyway, learned to love this record. I've played it several times. I think it sounds really good on vinyl. And then all of a sudden, there's a new one, Laugh Track. I was on a little vacation when this came out, and you can't get it on LP anyway. So I thought, okay, cool, I'll just listen to it digitally. So I listened to it several times. I had headphones. Again, with the early singles, didn't really pay too much attention, other than I knew that I liked Space Invader right away because it's kind of long and it's got some cool instrumental like breakdown and builds up with a lot of tension, something they used to do a lot of and they hadn't done as much. I also really came to like Weird Goodbyes, which that was another single with Bon Iver before 2 Pages of Frankenstein, so people thought that song would be on that album. Sorry, I've been looking. Looks like I'm getting an email notification. So yeah, I learned to those songs. Really, Weird Goodbyes really fits well into this album. The hardest part I had with Laugh Track is it didn't reveal itself. It just sounded very pleasant in the background, and I had, for the longest time, I probably listened to it 6 times. I've had a real hard time kind of picking out like, what is this album? What are the standout tracks? Hard time getting melodies stuck in my head. I must say it's starting to click a lot more. I think Alphabet City is a cool song to open up with. There are drums on this. You do hear more of those signature elements. I'm looking at the tracks here. Crumble is really cool. It's got Roseanne Cash on it, which is totally unexpected, but sounds really good. Smoke Detector gets into like a little bit more of a build and kind of goes off in some new directions. That's the last track on here. Laugh Track features Phoebe Bridgers again. I think it's a good record. I played it when I was on vacation. There was a small get together, and it was just, I put it on the speaker and it was playing, and a couple different people were asking me what it was, and I'm like, God, I got to pick this up. This just sounds really good. And I would say that about this record. I'm looking forward to getting on vinyl. It does sustain a mood really nicely. And it just sounds good. It sounds very good in the background. I think it's one of the least distinct national records I've heard, but I love getting two records by a band I'm into. I've always loved the companion album thing. Ecstasy comes in mind with Apple Venus 1 and 2. Of course, you have albums that came out on the same day, like Bright Eyes did that, Guns N' Roses did that, Bruce Springsteen did that. I also love, like, for a while, U2 seemed to do that. They always had a companion album, or at least that's the way I looked at it. War had Under Blood Red Sky. Let's see, the Unforgettable Fire had Wide Awake in America, an EP, and then Joshua Tree had a Rattle and Hum, like a double album, and then even Achtung Baby had Zeropa, which I remember shocked the hell out of me. I remember my future ex brother-in-law was like, "You two have a new record out." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, yeah, it's great." Thinking he was talking about Achtung Baby. No, 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 they got a brand new one out. I was like, "What?" I couldn't believe it. Back then news spread a little slower too, but same kind of thing with this. And I think it was really cool how they announced this. I guess they announced from the stage at a recent show, homecoming show in Ohio, that they had a new album out, and certain people in their fan club got to buy like a test pressing or a limited run of records on vinyl. But anyway, I think they're really cool. They're a really cool band. I always love the National. Absolutely, like, brilliant live. Always good. And these two albums are really good. They just take a little bit more time, especially Laugh Track. But I think it's worth it, and sounds really good. Just playing in the background. And sometimes I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The lyrics are cool if you dive into it too, of course. But a little less hooky and a little less immediate than most of their stuff. But so I'm gonna do another one, right? I'm gonna do another Unknown Pleasures, which I pick a record that I'm not really familiar with, and this time I picked something out of my girlfriend's collection, and it is Gene Clark's album, the Gene Clark collection. Now, normally I probably wouldn't pick like a greatest hits or a collection, but I have a hard time getting into the Byrds the way that I feel like I should. I have a hard time understanding who wrote what sometimes. They change their sound so often. I mean, I love, love, love the early Bird stuff, the singles, Turn, 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 Mr. Tambourine Man, 8 Miles High, love that stuff. But it gets a little cloudy when you get into later albums, like who's still in the band, who isn't, who's singing the songs. Okay, I know Sweetheart of the Rodeo really well. I don't know Notorious Bird Brothers as well, though it's one I want to dive into. But I thought, I don't know any Gene Clark, although I've heard a little bit because my girlfriend was pretty good friends with Gene Clark's son, actually. And yeah, so I've heard a little bit, but I couldn't name you Gene Clark songs. So I thought, okay, I'm going to dive into this collection, the Gene Clark collection, and maybe it'll help me understand not only his stuff, but also his role in the Byrds. So anyway, that's the next one. Thanks, everyone, and I'll talk to you soon.